Hello and welcome to the show. Now, I have always been a fan of the hot hatch, whether it be from the early days, the likes of the 205, the Golf GTI, up to the modern ones. Admittedly, some of the modern ones today are getting rather insane. The basic recipe has always been along the same lines. You take what is a normal family hatchback and you make it go a bit faster, or quite a bit faster in some of the modern cars examples. They still have all the usability of a sensible family car, but they're that bit more fun to drive, they're that bit quicker, and just, generally that little bit more special, and we have a selection of them in Horizon 5. So what better way to go and find out which one is the fastest than building a nice custom little circuit to weave its way around a city? Because, part of the fun, part of the usability aspect of these cars, they've got to be good at the tight, twisty stuff. So I decided to build a really, really nasty course to test the vehicles out. Now, they're going to be running in a reverse PI order. We start with the Mini, the Cooper Works GP Mini. Now, I will be honest, I've never been a big fan of the modern Minis. I will, however, always make an exception for this one. I do rather like it. It is very small in comparison to the cars we have running here. The lightest of all at £2,500. It does only have 215 horsepower, but power to weight ratio is still pretty good in this one, and it's a wonderful handling car, which is going to be needed because, as you can see already, this course is a challenge for the cars. The hot hatches should be good at this sort of stuff, where we've got sort of city streets, got lots of hairpins, lots of very, very tight corners for the vehicles to negotiate, and the Mini is doing a good job here. A little bit of understeer, try and get on the power. This is the longest straight on the course, as the Mini will barrel its way down here. Not many cars are going to get to even the 100-mile-an-hour mark around this course. That is the level sort of technicality that we are talking, and there are some very nasty braking zones. This one, the corner is deceptively tight. The next corner coming up, this is one of the toughest corners to get right. You've got to jump on the brakes a lot earlier than you think, because sort of downhill off camber corner, very, very nasty to have to try and deal with. The Mini is around it, no problem. Got another blind sort of braking zone coming up here as you blast out of the tunnel. It is towards the hairpin. Jump on the throttle, a little bit of wheel spin from the front-wheel drive Mini there. Nothing too bad as we head up towards the next sequence of corners. The real trick with a lot of these turns getting right is you've got to try and brake in a straight line as best as possible. The front-wheel drive cars do not like the trail braking. If you're just sort of starting to turn in a little bit to the corner, they really struggle. Very easy to lock up. The Mini, not so many problems with it around here. Admittedly, one of the slower vehicles in a straight line. We've got a very nasty section. Again, another corner where you're kind of turning. You've kind of not finished the corner before you want to be on the brakes for the hairpin. A very, very technical section here to end the run. It's a climb up the hill for the Mini, acceleration test, steep hill towards the finish line, where the Mini will struggle just a little bit compared to some of the cars that will run later that have considerably more power, but it is across the line. 215.7 is the benchmark for later cars to try and beat. Our next contender is actually the most modern car that we have here, the Hyundai Veloster N. It is more powerful than the Mini, 275 horsepower, but it's considerably heavier, 3,100 pounds. I will say I do have quite a soft spot for the Veloster as well. I had this car, I did quite a lot with this car in Horizon 4. It was often very, very quick for some of the stuff that I used it for, so yeah, I do actually rather like this one. I'm expecting it to perhaps be a little faster than the Mini. It may struggle in the really technical stuff compared to the much lighter car, but it does have that little bit more power. Things are relatively smooth sailing so far. That's another very tricky braking zone to get the car. The car stopped and turned as we head up towards the first split, and it is faster, but not by very much. It's only a tenth and a bit faster than the Mini so far as we head towards the next likely to be understeering corner for these front. In fact, for any of the cars, front-wheel drive or all-wheel drive, likely to struggle a little bit with understeer. Carry as much speed as you can down this next straight up towards a couple of miles an hour faster than the Mini. The corner off of the straight, that left-hander there, is another deceptive corner. You expect it to be a really slow corner. You can carry surprising amounts of speed, and you can get away with hitting the inside curb on it quite hard. Another big braking zone for the Veloster. It gets stopped and turned down the bottom of the hill. Don't want to bump the wall on the outside. There's lots of sticky out bits that can cause you all sorts of problems if you do. Run through the tunnel. Big braking zone now for the slowest corner on the track, and we are up on the Mini. It's 1.2 seconds faster through this so far. It's a good run for the Veloster, just got to get it stopped for this chicane next. And as I say, with the braking on some of these cars, especially as we start getting faster and more powerful cars, it can become quite difficult. Not such a problem with the Veloster. The Veloster did well, actually. It wasn't too difficult, as I say that. Just struggled to pull it up in time a little bit there, but didn't get the lockups that you'll see from some stuff. And has lost a little bit of time in the sort of the third sector there to the Mini, or into the really, really, again, twisty parts through here to try and end the run. Now it's just the blast up the hill for the Hyundai. Try and make the most of that little bit more power. It's still not going to pass the 100-mile-an-hour mark on this stage. It crosses the line, and it is going to be close, but it is a little bit faster at 214.8. Ignore the fact I managed to press the wrong button on the Elgato. It will put the Veloster to the top of the table. It's a second clear of the Mini. It's, I say, perhaps roughly what we're expecting. Both were actually really good, fun cars to drive, so that is always, I say, that is always important around here. Yeah, both were very enjoyable vehicles to drive around this course. We have up next our first all-wheel drive contender. This is the Volkswagen Golf R. It is the latest one that we have in Horizon 5, so it's a 2014 model, so it's still a little bit out of date, but we're working with what we've got. Of course, the advantage of all-wheel drive is the traction, not only off the line, but when we're dealing with a lot of slow corners around this circuit. The Golf is a little bit wide on the way into the hairpin. Go for a late apex, slight bit of a miss on that one, but can still get the power down nicely. Jump on the brakes for this downhill section, bobbles across the curb without too many issues. But yeah, the all-wheel drive traction is likely to be a bit helpful around here because you're dealing with so many low-speed acceleration zones. The front-wheel drive cars can spin the wheels up quite easily. We're across at the first split, and it is perhaps unsurprising to see the Golf is going a bit faster in all of this. Now, of course, the downside of the all-wheel drive is, well, I say the cars are quite heavy. The Golf's nearly 3,300 pounds. It's not actually that much heavier than the Hyundai. It's more powerful as well at 296 horsepower. So it's, you know, statistic-wise, it's pretty good for the Golf. It hits the inside curb there without too much problem. You've got to be careful the left-hand side curb here. The reason why you don't see me swinging all the way out is there's a bump on that curb. You hit it, it actually lifts the back of the car up, and you get no braking and no steering. Most of the curbing is fine to run across, but on that particular bit, you really can't risk it. 9 times out of 10, you get into trouble. So, yeah, that's why the cars aren't being pulled all the way across. It's stopped for the hairpin with the Volkswagen. A little bit of wheel spin, actually, is trying to put the power down. We're still going faster. Not huge gains, though, in that mid-sector. Not as big a gains as got from the first sector with the Volkswagen. Get the change of direction through here. There'll be a little bit of understeer. Nothing too crazy though for this. And again, no real problems with the lockups, with getting the car slowed down for these corners. A little bit of wheel spin coming off the vehicle as we make, again, small gains in time through these next couple of sectors. It's a little tiny bit wide on that penultimate corner, but can straighten up nicely for the blast up the hill using all 300 horsepower that the Volkswagen has to offer. But it's still a tough climb for the cars up here, and it is across the line. It's going to be faster for the Golf. A good run from the R to 12.8 for that, and it will put the Volkswagen to the top of the table. Couple of seconds clear of the Veloster. Now, this is perhaps not a crazy big surprise in all of this. I was expecting all-wheel drive here to be powerful with the nature of the circuit. So, yeah, no surprise the Golf has gone very quickly indeed. We move next to the first of our Meganes. We have the 2018 Megane R.S. Unfortunately, we don't have the really fast Cup R, whatever the one is called, that had the, I think, front-wheel drive, the very expensive one, had the front-wheel drive Nürburgring record. This is the one we have to play around with. At least 275 horsepower in this one, so we're talking same power as the Veloster, actually 3,100 pounds, so pretty much the same weight, very similar stats, a bit more torque in the Renault, that's about it for differences. A bit more wheel spin, certainly, from this car on some of the twistier bits. Now, we are back to front-wheel drive with the Renault, so we're not expecting this first sector to be faster than the Golf. I mean, the Volkswagen just off the line is likely to make a good chunk of time, and indeed, the Megane is a little bit down. We're a couple of tenths down. That would easily be just off the line, I should think, the difference between the pair. Now, it's not the worst start line here because it's downhill, so that does help the front-wheel drive cars a little bit with their launch. We're on to the longest straight that we have here, as the Megane will get slowed down. It's, again, about 90 miles an hour, not the fastest we've seen from a car down here. Get the next change of direction right. The street furniture is a thing. There's not much you can do about it, really, around here. It doesn't, on the most part, doesn't really cause too many problems, though, thankfully, at least with the way this route is laid out, and the bits that are the commonly hit ones. They don't seem to really slow the cars down too much, thankfully. Again, big stop for the hairpin, and we have lost a little bit more time for the Renault. It's half a second down on the Golf. Not huge chunks of time going on here, just losing a little bit here and there. Get it stopped for this next kind of chicane. Is it the first part of this corner is a bit weird. In fact, all the way through it, it looks like a tighter corner in many regards than it actually is through there. You can kind of carry a nice speed, there's a nice flow through it. Again, jump on the brakes for them again, get it slowed down. We're heading up towards a third split now, and it's pretty much identical actually through there with the Volkswagen. Just got to get it slowed for the really tight hairpins. The Megane struggled a little bit more with traction than we've seen from some of the other cars. Front wheels wanting to spin up a little bit easier than we've seen from some vehicles. It's now just the blast towards the line for the Renault, and it is across. It's close. It's going to be close with that Golf, but it is not quite enough. A 2:13.4 for the Megane in the end will leave it in a second place. Yeah, it wasn't huge chunks of time that we're missing in that one. It was just gradually losing little bits here and there, and overall it's going to sit into, or go into a second place. You know, still a quick time through all of that course. Now, the next vehicle we have to run through here is, well, it's another Megane. This is the R26R. It's the oldest car of the lot. This is a 2008 car. But it is relatively light at 2,700 pounds. Doesn't have anywhere near as much power as some of the others at 227. But it is well known for being an incredibly good handling vehicle. Phenomenally fast in Horizon 4, often when talking modified, but it's a very nice car to drive, this one. It's not necessarily the easiest to get things right with. Again, it's quite eager to spin the wheels in some of these corners, which is not the most uncommon thing. It's the trying to get the braking right with this one. It's very easy to overshoot, very easy to make little mistakes. Head up towards the first split. It is quicker than the Volkswagen. Considering the Volkswagen's speed off the line, that is a very good showing for the Renault here. But yeah, trying to get the braking, as I said, a lot of these braking zones are not really, you want to brake the car in a straight line, which is great, everything, but a lot of the braking zones here aren't really straight lines, so it's a bit of a fiddle. The Megane may not have as much power as some, but that is some good speed down the back straight, right up to 95 miles an hour. It actually does get away with a little brush on the left-hand side curb there, as we're running down the hill again. But yeah, really got to try and get the car stopped in a straight line. The Megane does not like if you end up having a little bit of steering lock on. It's very easy to lock up and get into trouble. Blast through the tunnel and onto the brakes up towards the hairpins. Actually a little bit wide on the hairpin, but it is still going very, very quickly. We're 0.8 of a second up on that Volkswagen. That's a big gaining time for the Megane. Again, remember, this is a front-wheel drive vehicle through here. It doesn't have perhaps the traction that you get from the Golf, but it is much, much lighter. Pretty sure it was lifting wheels up in some of these places as well, especially if it's bouncing off the curbs. Dive on the brakes once more through this next section. It may not have as much power as some cars, but it is really, really making the most of what it's got. It's almost 2 seconds up on the Golf. A little wide, though, into this final section. Gather it back up for the final corner. Now it's just the acceleration up the hill for them again. Try and get as much speed out of the vehicle as possible. It's not, again, considering it's not got the most power, it's doing a good job of making the most of what it does have. It's across the line at 2:11.0 for the Renault. Is a very, very good time indeed. That will put the Megane to the top of the table. Yeah, I mean, it's almost 2 seconds clear of the Golf. That little bit of a surprise result. And now we've got slightly higher PI than, well, you know, the Megane R.S. did not quite expect the size of the gap that would go with it. That's, yeah, that is a very, very good run indeed for the R26. We have next, back to all-wheel drive, the Audi. This is the RS3. 335 horsepower going on here, so we've got over 100 horsepower more than we had running in the Megane, but it is quite heavy at 3,000, well, nearly 3,500 pounds. It's one of the bigger cars, one of the heavier cars that will run through this course. And I mean, it is a little bit noticeable in some of the corners. It doesn't quite have the same agility that you get from the Megane, but it does have all-wheel drive traction, and it does have brute force on its side. So we're expecting it to probably be a bit faster to this first split. It's got that all-wheel drive, launch off of the line. We saw from the Volkswagen it was quick to hit up towards here, and indeed it's a phenomenal first sector from the RS3. It's almost a second clear of the Megane as we run through these next few corners, but then this is where it starts to struggle a little bit more. The Megane can find traction without too much trouble through here, and the RS3 just can't quite carry the same corner speed. See, all of that power, and it's actually a mile an hour slower down the back straight than we saw from the Megane, because the Renault could carry the corner speed, sort of leading on to that straight. The Audi is through the next change of direction, no problem. We'll jump on the brakes. It's not quite as good under braking as the Renault, although we don't have the issues of trail braking with this car. It doesn't lock up in the same way that the Megane can do as you head up towards the hairpin. The Audi gets stopped, and it has lost a big chunk of that time. It's now only 0.3 of a second up, and this next sector is the sort of bit where the Megane is going to be good. We've got lots of these sort of, I say, relatively medium speed corners for this sort of course at least. The Audi gets change of direction through there, not too bad. Can jump on the throttle and use the power up towards this next section. It's got to be earlier on the brakes than we saw from the Megane as we head towards the third split. The time is very, very close. It's lost pretty much all of its advantage now. Basically a dead heat coming into these next couple of corners, although this might be just where we see the RS3 excel slightly. It's this traction acceleration zone up the hill. The Audi's making the most of its big chunk of power as we head towards the finish line. Actually, that's similar speed to the Megane across the line there, and the Audi does it just. It gained a couple of tenths in that final sector to make it, I say, a smidge more comfortable. But from my initial expectations of this perhaps being a bit dominated by all-wheel drive cars, that Megane got a lot closer to the Audi than I would expected. Yes, the Audi is big and heavy and everything. The Megane is a complete opposite, and it is a very twisty layout. But yeah, the Audi only just did it. Well, continuing the front-wheel drive and all-wheel drive battle, up next we have got a Civic. This is the 2016 Civic Type R. We've got some 300 horsepower available in this one. It's lighter than the Audi at £3,000, but I mean, that's still £300 heavier than the Megane and everything. Now, this is a difficult one to get right in the braking zone. Don't quite know exactly what it is with this car, but it's super easy to lock a wheel and get it into a bit of trouble. It's eager to spin the wheels as well out of these slower corners. Now that's not a massive surprise. I guess a little bit of understeer mid-corner through all of that. We're through the first split and we are down on the Audi's time. No big surprise in all of this one. The other thing that we might also see a little bit with the front-wheel drive cars, of course, is tyre temperature. Now, this is a thing in Horizon 5. Cold tyres do make a bit of a difference. And, you know, the front-wheel drives do struggle a smidge, perhaps, on the opening section of the course. That may be actually what causes some of the issues with getting the braking right in the very first couple of big braking zones. By now, it's not too bad. The front tyres are doing a little bit better as we dive under brakes once again for the very challenging downhill stop. It's a great corner when you get it right. It's a horrible corner most of the time. Very difficult to judge the braking and everything for it. Now, once again, dive on the brakes for the hairpin. The car's fine climbing across the curb. It's gained a little bit of time on the Audi, but not a crazy amount. It's only a couple of tenths swing through that second sector. Nothing like we saw from the Megane, although we'd still be up on that Renault's time as we head around these next couple of corners. Again, get on the power early. The Civic, bouncing its way across the curbs. Dive on the brakes once more. You can get away with a little bit wide on the exit through there as we head up towards the split. And now we've gained some time in that third sector. We're 0.3 of a second up on the Audi. That's good, although the front-wheel drive may struggle just a smidge through here. See it understeer a little bit, spinning the wheels as well as the power is frantically trying to be put to the road, as we blast up towards the finish line. It's got good speed up the hill, though, for the Civic, and it crosses the line. That would have done it some good, and indeed it does. A 210.3 for the Honda. We'll take it to the top of the leaderboard. It does beat the Audi by about half a second, 7/10 faster than the Megane. It's a good showing from the Civic. As I said, I was worried about the all-wheel drive cars being too strong, but the Civic does show its strength there. Fantastic blast up the hill as well for the Honda, despite me expecting it to come on, or me expecting to have trouble getting the power down going up that hill. It absolutely flew. We're now getting on to some serious machinery here. From Ford, we have the Focus RS, 350 horsepower in this one. It's a lot of power going on in this, 350 torque as well, all-wheel drive. Okay, a little bit heavier, 3,400 pounds. That is perhaps to be expected, but you know, the all-wheel drive is likely to be powerful. We don't quite have the same difficulties in getting the car stopped. We're still going to get on the brakes early. This is a horribly tight downhill, kind of tightening radius corner. So, yeah, it looks like you jump on the brakes really early for it, but it absolutely has to be done. Now, we're expecting this to be faster through the first split, and indeed it is up on the time set by the Civic. Interestingly, actually, it's not quicker than the Audi through the first sector. The Audi had an absolutely blinding first sector, but we know the Audi faded as we got to the twistier parts of the course. The Focus we're expecting to be strong as it heads down the back straight here, and indeed it's up to 97, 98 miles an hour. Can't quite crack the 100. Carries good speed up the hill. Don't go too far to the left. Indeed, it doesn't get through the next turn. Focus on, once again, the heavy braking zone. Not got the same issue with the trail braking in the Focus. You can get away with a lot more. And this car is way more forgiving. I mean, I think in general, probably the biggest difference with these all-wheel drive cars is they have tended to be a lot more forgiving in the braking zone than seen from the front-wheel drives. And indeed, the second sector, it's a little wide actually on the exit from the hairpin for the Ford, but other than that, the second sector has been a blinder. We're nearly a second and a half clear of that Honda. Now through the chicane once again, just let the car wander a little bit wide on the exit there as it'll put it in line for the next corner. Jump on the brakes while it's in a straight line and get it turned. Up towards the third split now, it's going to have lost some of the time actually to the Civic through there. It was a little wide out of the hairpin, but that's curious. I was not expecting it to have lost a chunk of time through there. We're into the final corners now. It should be good up the hill with all of the power. It's neat enough through that section. The Focus climbs towards the finish line. It is quick up the hill. It's actually about the same sort of speed we saw from the Civic by the time it got to the line. Interesting. It is faster though. A 209.5 will do the job in that one. Yeah, it lost a little bit towards the end. That Civic was so quick in the final sort of sector. The Focus was very quick in the mid-sector, but didn't quite carry it later on. Either way, though, it is the Ford that is going to go to the top of the table. The Civic will remain in second. I mean, it's not a huge gap between the Focus and the Civic in this one, which, as I said, is quite impressive. We move next to the Mercedes, the A45 AMG. 2013 model, this one. We have more power than the Focus, 355. It's actually lighter as well, which really surprised me. 3,200 pounds. I would have expected the Mercedes to be the heavier of the two. However, that is not the case. I mean, in many ways, similar to the Focus. I mean, they're essentially, I say, doing the same thing. High power, all-wheel drive, similar sorts of weights. So we'd expect them to be strong and perhaps weak in similar places through here. So it's likely to be a half-decent first sector for Merc. Nothing majorly difficult with this. I will say it's perhaps a little more difficult to get it stopped than the Ford. I'm not quite sure why. And it is a smidge up in terms of the first sector there. Yeah, you would expect this one to be the better car getting slowed down, being that little bit lighter, but either way, the Ford feels a little bit easier under brakes. Down this back straight we go with the Mercedes, and it's 99 miles an hour. It's close, very close to the 100 mark. It did not quite do it though for the Merc. I mean, there's a good side. It's obviously got some, it can carry good corner speed, and it's got some good top end in all of this. Mercedes on the brakes, it's a smidge wide though at the bottom of the hill. Nothing too crazy though as we head towards the tunnel. It's kind of a little tap on the brakes, get the car turned in, and you're sort of braking before you've even finished turning through there with these cars, and it's lost time. And we know the Ford was an absolute monster through that second sector. We're half a second down now with the Mercedes. I don't know quite where the Ford made its time up, but the Ford was absolutely flying through there, but it struggled a little bit later on. Mercedes a tighter line through there. Perhaps didn't really want to clonk the lamppost, but didn't seem to harm too much. Again, get the car slowed down. It is actually very neat and tidy as we head up towards the third split. What it's going to be doing is gained back that time through there. It's now absolutely neck and neck almost with that Ford. We're into the final couple of slow, twisty corners in this section. The Mercedes can jump on the power, and now it's that run towards the line for the Merc. Are we going to see higher than 90 miles an hour across the finish line? This might be the car to do it. It is slightly down. Very close, though. 1 mile an hour down. It's set an identical time to the Focus. I think in all of the times doing this, is the first time we've had one of these kind of stock car showdowns. It has been a complete dead heat. The Focus was an absolute monster in that mid-sector, but not quite as quick as the Mercedes in the rest of them. So it's a tie. They both beat the Civic, not by a crazy big margin, but they do both beat the Civic in that one. Yeah, was not really expecting to see a dead heat between some cars. I mean, we might have a dead heat at the front. It's going to come down to what can the 2018 Civic do in this one. 306 horsepower going on, so we're much less powerful than the Focus and the Mercedes. We are lighter, 3,100 pounds. It's not crazy light though. And with front-wheel drive, of course, we don't have the same traction, so we're going to be down by the time we get to this, well, likely to be down by the time we get to this first checkpoint. It is the highest PI, though, of all the vehicles. And I have to say, it's not bad through the corners. It's difficult under braking, though. It is a tough car to get slowed down. It is very, very easy to lock the brakes in this. I think combination of the speed, this thing is a bit quicker than all the other front-wheel drives that have gone so far, and the nature of the circuit, especially the cold tyres, do make it a bit of a handful. And as expected, we are down. It's only a tenth of a second. It's not a huge margin here. We're only talking a tenth of a second for the Civic as we head up towards the next corner. So if it can be fast through this middle sector, it's a bit of understeer trying to get on the power. It is a bit noticeable in this one, though. How fast is it going to be? Are we going to crack the 100 mile an hour mark? Indeed we do. It's 101 for the Civic down there. So it has clearly got the acceleration to match and even be a little bit faster than those all-wheel drive competitors. It's not quite the neatest of lines across the top. However, it is all under control. Gets slowed down for the bottom of the hill. Heading up towards the second split. I mean, this is an important one. We expect it to perhaps be a little bit up as it gets under brakes for the heaven, although it will struggle under traction. In fact, it isn't. It's down by 6/10 of a second. So that shows how fast the Ford was through that mid-sector. It doesn't spin the wheels as much out of the slow hairpin as expected. Now, we know the Ford struggled through this next bit. The Civic is looking neat. I mean, the Ford looked neat and tidy. The Civic is definitely looking neat and tidy. It's early on the brakes. That's more to do with the fact that the Civic is just much faster down there than everything else. It is neat on the exit and it's gained some time through that mid-sector. We're 2/10 up. Will the front-wheel drive be its undoing, though, through these next couple of corners? He's got to try and get the power down for the run up the hill. If it can do that, we know this car has fantastic straight-line speed. It was already proved that one. It's climbing up the hill now towards the finish line. It's looking good for the Civic. It's a few miles an hour faster across the finish line. I think that might be enough. It is just. We're only talking, what is it, 3/10 of a second perhaps in that one? Indeed, it is. The Civic, though, will go to the top of the table, and it will be 2018 Civic that takes victory, beating the Focus and the Mercedes. The 2016 Civic will be in fourth ahead of the RS3. The Megane will take, the R26 Megane will take sixth ahead of the Volkswagen, with the Megane RS beating the Veloster and the Mini at the bottom of the table. I mean, as far as conclusions go, well, the Civic Type R will take victory in this one. The actual leaderboard is pretty much in PI order, the only exception being the Golf and the Megane R.S are swapped around. So you might not see this as the sort of biggest upset, the biggest surprise, although I have to say there were a few things that did surprise me. Most notably was the power of the front-wheel drive cars. I thought, when I built this course, I wanted to build this technical twisty city circuit, and I was worried it was going to be too biased to the all-wheel drive cars. I was worried the front-wheel drives wouldn't stand a chance at all. And I was completely wrong in that one. I will say the all-wheel drives were a bit easier to drive around here, but when you got it right, the front-wheel drive, the Civic won at the end of the day. The front-wheel drives were very, very much there. And the Megane, the R26 Megane was also perhaps one of the biggest price. Again, I know the PI is there or thereabouts, but that is a much older car than the rest of them. It's much, it's considerably down on power compared to the rest of them. And that put up one hell of a fight that put up a hell of a show in this one. It very nearly beat the RS3. It's only a few tenths in it between it and the RS3. It's not that far down, even on the Focus RS, for an example. That is very, very good going indeed. The other thing that I did kind of realise when doing this is we could do with some more updated hot hatches, I'm not going to lie. Don't get me wrong, I like the cars that we have here, and this thing was fun to do, but we are missing out on the fast, the modern fast Megane. We're missing out on the faster Golfs. We're missing out on the new Mercedes, the new A45 AMG, or whatever the numbers are, because I don't remember them these days. It does feel like we're missing out on some... the new RS3 even, for that matter. We're missing out on some more updated versions. As I said, well, this was fun to do. We've got cars from quite a few different eras. I mean, the reason why we ran 2 Meganes and 2 Civics is because they were going to be competitive, and the other hot hatches we had access to perhaps really weren't. So, yeah, would like some more selection, like some updated hot hatches, if you will. But this was really, really good fun to do. Either way, I like these sort of challenges, sort of driving. I shall put the share code for this track in the description if you want to have a go with it yourself. See what you can make of it. It is certainly a different kind of challenge. It's good fun, though. Good fun with some good handling cars. That, though, is going to be it from me. Thank you all very much for watching. And until next time, goodbye.